So 1993, I was in IT. I wasn't a vendor. And I was at a typical mid-sized company growing, and we were using file sharing based email. And we had not had any sort of historical legacy mainframe systems. We were never on profs or anything like that. And we just had grown up this email culture. And as we were growing as a company, you couldn't just go down the hall and say, let's have a meeting. It had to start getting a formalized structure from when it was 200 people in one building to 1,000 people across the campus.
So were people using electronic calendars then?
Not really. There was a lot of file effects and whatever daytimers and the like, and on paper, yeah, and email to try to coordinate calendars, but that was pretty much it in that company. Some of the very earliest PDAs were just starting to come out. Mm-hmm. So the HP 95LX was like one of the first handheld flip-up devices that had CC Mail built into it. Some people had Palm Pilots or Palms, that they were just Palms at the time, and we're starting to use that. But really, for the most part, electronic calendaring wasn't in the environment. It wasn't in the workplace, unless you had been in a big company that had IBM Profs and a mainframe. That was kind of the only way. So those people were used to, oh yeah, well, I'll have my calendars just on my system. That wasn't a very good calendar, but it was their closed environment. You had it. We didn't have any of that.
Okay.
And none of the file sharing vendors had any kind of calendaring service as part of their email systems. There was nothing with CC Mail. There was nothing with Microsoft Mail. WordPerfect Office eventually added calendar, but it wasn't initially there either. So the industry in the early 90s was just starting to recognize calendaring. Lotus acquired a company called Threads in the UK, and they made Organizer. And so Lotus had this PIM product, Lotus Organizer, and then they undertook in 93 the engineering to make Lotus Organizer a group calendar product.
Okay.
And as a CC Mail customer with these kind of problems in our business, we were extremely interested in what Lotus was going to do there. Microsoft also started doing it with Schedule Plus, which was some added to Microsoft Mail. Mm-hmm. And, so it sort of got born in the distributed environment in 93 timeframe.
So why do you think the calendar was merged with mail?
I think transport was really the main reason. Everybody already got email in the organization, so it was the only system in most companies that touched everyone. And if I could piggyback on that to do some other business workflow, especially something as horizontal as calendaring, I think that was probably the logic. And in fact, the early versions of Lotus Organizer didn't do anything in the mail system. Your invites and all of that stuff were separate. When you launched Lotus Organizer, you saw them, but they were culled out of your inbox by the Organizer program, essentially as a hack, right? It would go into your inbox and look for keywords and pull those over into Lotus Organizer. But you did all your workflow and calendaring stuff in the calendar then. It wasn't like you were in your inbox and saw an invitation.
Okay. I just want to see if everything is working all right. Actually, this is good, by the way. I didn't even know that the early versions of calendar were actually separated from the mail.
It just used mail as transport. That was all it was, and it was.
And also, I guess it's a good distribution channel, right? Like
yeah.
You basically say, well, if I want to get calendar in the hands of a lot of people, at the end of the day, put it with the mail.
Right. Well, and it had a directory already.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That, But the individual calendars were individual files. They weren't in any kind of shared database. They had to go on an H drive on the network or whatever.
So local.
But it was a single file. It was my .org or OR2 or whatever, and I could copy that to my local drive if I was working on it at home or on a laptop or whatever. Not that everybody had laptops at that time either, but not many at all did.
Yeah.
But it was very single user centric and very kludgy. It just was, but it somehow worked.
Okay, and then so then, what was the next logical step from there?
So then, in kind of the mid '90s, is when the client server messaging era sort of started to take off with Lotus with Notes v4, and Microsoft with Exchange.
Right.
And Exchange 96 originally just used a Microsoft Mail client, but then they introduced Outlook in 97. Yeah, Outlook 97. And that was a combined mail and calendar client. And Lotus introduced Notes 4.5 with an integrated calendar that we had based loosely on the features of Organizer in 1997. We also made Organizer work on top of Notes.
What were customers saying back then?
Calendaring became a requirement driven by IT.
By IT?
Yeah. Yeah, just as this is another service we want to provide as part of our enterprise communications infrastructure. Now that we see the technology is available, we want it. We want it in this environment. Okay. And a lot of companies that had never gone through a file sharing based email system were still on mainframes. We're on Profs, we're on DEC All-in-One, all these other sort of prior generation mail systems that had calendaring. So they were like, well, if I'm going to move to client server, it's got to have a calendar. So that was really the impetus for us to get that into the product in the 96, 97 timeframe.
Okay. And then so that calendar that you started to put in there, when did it become? When did the switch happen from saying, okay, it's my calendar, versus I want to start sharing it with other people? And what was the reason people started to want a calendar share?
I think that some corporate cultures really drove the idea that I want everybody to be able to see what my calendar is, my department. I want to be able to choose people to know where I'm at. The mechanisms weren't easy to distribute that information any other way. Most of the email systems didn't even have an out of the office kind of a function at that point, not an effective one. So, putting my calendar online was an easy way to tell my work group or my department or my building or whatever where I was, and even the earliest versions of Notes and Outlook had some level of privacy controls or whatever that I could just publish free time, or I could just publish my calendar or whatever. And I think that the organizational need was just to be able to know where people were as companies that were distributed across multiple sites started to work together more using other current generation collaborative tools.
Okay. And did that need then evolve into something else after that, or was it really, I want to know what people in my organization are doing?
I think the evolution from there was, how do I schedule conference rooms? How do I think about really truly doing meetings this way and not just personal diary info? How do I sync that to something that's a local device of some kind, or at least have access to it at home? So the usage patterns did definitely change from the initial, sort of our 4.5 release to now. The use of calendaring has become part and parcel of every deployment. For a while there, when we introduced it, about half customers said, we're not going to use that. We're just using it as an email system, or we have apps. But calendaring now in 2010, I think pretty much every Notes customer uses the calendar. I'm sure that Outlook users would say exactly the same thing.